Story 1. Ticketmaster is reselling most of the verified reseller event tickets and blaming scalpers for it. Story 2. The dumb jock stereotype is a result of untreated concussions. I will stand by this belief. I noticed this while working as an athletic trainer in on-field sports medicine with high school athletes. What are the symptoms of a concussion? Difficulty concentrating and decreased attention. Increased symptoms, especially headache with cognitive strain. Sensitivity to light and sound. Memory loss and forgetfulness. Difficulty with emotional regulation. Emotional lability, showing emotions inappropriate to the situation or out of character. Fatigue made worse by cognitive strain. What are the dumb jock stereotypes? Difficulty paying attention in class. Difficulty with reading and comprehension due to cognitive strain. Emotional dysregulation, including anger outbursts with little provocation and increased irritability. Poor performance on tests and memory-based tasks. 15 years ago, we said he got his bell rung and put him back into the game. Sometimes we made him sit out a week and then sent him back in. Now, there are concussion protocols, and schools have a better understanding that a concussion is a brain injury. With continued education, I hope we see less of the stereotype because concussion management at the school level continues to improve. Story 3. World Cup and Olympic Games hosting are perfect scenarios for corruption. They generally cost 5 to 10 times more than expected. Story 4. There is other life in the universe. But as the universe is so unimaginably huge, we will never really get to see it. Story 5. My ex's mother had factitious disorder imposed on another and was poisoning her son by putting rat poison in his food. Story 6. I think animals like my cat pick up on things we do not realize we are expressing, as if they understand us on a deeper, unspoken level. I am convinced my cat has been silently judging my life choices for years. Story 7. It's funny, but I was thinking of starting this exact thread yesterday. Something you know but can never prove, and nobody will ever admit to it. My contribution. The men who went to the moon in 1969, probably all astronauts before and after, were given a suicide pill in case of emergencies. Story 8. My girlfriend leaves just the half piece of toilet paper, the one that is mostly attached to the roll. I know she is the one doing it, and I know it is intentional laziness. She most likely has to ration her own toilet paper use to make it happen. Yet she blames it on the roommate or says it was an accident. I see right through her little games. Story 9. Visually impaired individuals communicate secret messages to each other using basketballs, but none of them will admit it. Story 10. Most secret societies in history up to today are just an excuse for wealthy older men to drink, have sex with each other or with prostitutes, wear silly hats, and perform goofy handshakes without being nagged by their wives. Story 11. Elderly retired people have a secret message group where they coordinate days to all go out and drive very slowly in the morning during rush hour just to annoy other drivers. Story 12. Cryptocurrency is being used by nation-state actors and cartels to evade sanctions and launder money outside the traditional banking system. Similar to the Onion router, it was released to the public to create hype, noise, and entropy, allowing the most shady users to hide in plain sight. I suspect one of the major coins was invented by someone nefarious for this very purpose. I know that some cryptocurrency enthusiasts will argue about transparency because the blockchain ledger records all transactions, but it is not like there is a wallet labeled Mr. Kim, Ryongsan Residence, Pyongyang. Major intelligence agencies also know very well who Satoshi Nakamoto is. Story 13. I can watch YouTube, and as long as I am sitting in front of my computer, I get fewer ads. The moment I am a few steps away doing something else and just listening to YouTube, I start to get all of the ads. Then I have to go back to my computer to skip the ad. I am convinced it is because YouTube can sense when I step away and they want me to watch or upgrade to premium. Story 14. A good friend's girlfriend is cheating on him, most definitely. She gets away with it by constantly getting mad at him for spending time with anyone else and convincing him that he needs to do better. I hope he figures it out at some point. Story 15. Technology deeply and inherently understands what a Monday is, making sure it works less, breaks more, and is generally slower and less useful on this day of the week. Forget Mondays. Forget one's tomorrow. FML. Story 16. Some entity is interfering with the timeline, making small changes to try to fix things but actually making them worse. It is similar to the butterfly effect. Story 17. This post appears to be from a secret malicious group evaluating their destructive plan. Story 18. I am absolutely certain the Central Intelligence Agency has its fingers in every major drug cartel in the world. I am sure they are kingmakers and breakers. The Central Intelligence Agency feeds intelligence and organizational assistance in return for massive amounts of cash. If a drug cartel does not play ball, their rivals get the Central Intelligence Agency's help, while everything the Central Intelligence Agency knows about them goes to various drug enforcement agencies around the world. I believe the Central Intelligence Agency is the ultimate organized crime syndicate, and it is buried so deep that no other government agency knows it, and even half the Central Intelligence Agency does not know about it. Most certainly not the Central Intelligence Agency director or anybody who might have to report to Congress. For example, does anybody think the Central Intelligence Agency walked away from all those poppy fields in Afghanistan? Not a chance. Story 19. 9 years ago, my former roommate ate my leftovers and lied about it. I am still mad about it. Why lie? I know it was you. Story 20. There is something in the universe that can sense your urgency and hit you with all red lights when you are driving somewhere and running late. The same force can tell when you plan to do something at the red lights, such as finding something in your purse, finishing your grocery list, or retrieving an item that fell on the passenger side floor, and therefore causes you to catch none. Story 21. Luigi Mangione was located by federal authorities using technology that would be deemed unconstitutional. It was made to look like a random McDonald's worker spotted him, even though he was wearing a beanie and COVID mask. When he was caught, he was using his personal laptop in a McDonald's connected to their Wi-Fi. Story 22. California high-speed rail is a money laundering scheme. The Church of Scientology and most Christian megachurches are absolutely tax fraud and sometimes right-leaning propaganda machines. Humans will be our own great filter. Story 23. I am absolutely sure that there is more to consciousness than just brain activity, but I have no way to prove it. Story 24. Artificial intelligence exists to destroy trust in internet-based information and discourage fact-checking, which people use to defend themselves against state and other propaganda and manipulation. It has already made internet search engines ineffective at providing relevant information, and the situation will worsen as it has taken over capitalism. Anyone promoting artificial intelligence as a solution to any problem is either influenced by propaganda or benefiting from it. Story 25. Black holes eventually swallow enough matter to expel it and create a new universe at the other end, known as a white hole. Story 26. The answer to the Fermi paradox is that we are very early in the timeline of the universe. We are the old ones, the forerunners of our universe. Story 27. Google listens to what I am saying. The number of times a pop-up or advertisement appears immediately after I have spoken about that exact thing cannot be a coincidence. Story 28. Companies are intentionally making their sites and customer support poor, not just to save money, but because the more difficult they are, the harder it is to pay them or cancel services. Then, they can charge you for late fees and other penalties. Story 29. Intelligent life exists elsewhere in the universe. It is statistically impossible for it not to exist given the vastness of the universe. We are just unlikely to ever come into indisputable contact with it for the same reason it exists. There is just too much space. Story 30. People are mean to each other because they watch too many fictional characters on television and cannot tell the difference between that and real life. The last second before your brain dies feels like forever, and that is where the idea of heaven and hell comes from. Story 31. When healthcare professionals treat you differently because they do not like your race, it is hard to prove yet very obvious, especially with nurses. Story 32. My cat has a second sense. I've heard that cats and other animals are intuitive when it comes to humans being sick. I noticed my little black cat was always lying on my left-hand side every time I went to bed. She did the same thing when I was on the couch. Even at dinner, she'd sit on the chair to my left, near my hip and stomach. It was like she was trying to tell me something. So I thought, why not? I scheduled an appointment with my primary care physician, had a quick physical, and got some blood work done. I went in, had the tests, and then waited over a week for the results. Finally, they came back and everything was perfectly fine. So yes, my cat did have a sixth sense. My cat sensed that I had too much money in my bank account and that I needed to spend a few $100s of it on unneeded copayments. Thank you, pseudoscience and my imperfect cat. Still love her though. Story 33. There are multiple universes and we do not die in our timeline. Instead, we tune in to one of the others. For example, I was hit by a car while cycling. It was not at a very high speed, as the limit was 25 miles per hour. I remember seeing the headlights, saying, "Oh no," and my life flashing before my eyes. Luckily, I ended up hitting the car's rear passenger door, rather than being hit head-on. My thought is that in that timeline, I actually did get hit and died, and we do die to everyone else in that timeline. However, the life flashing before my eyes was my consciousness aligning with the new timeline. Story 34. Have you ever thought about how it is a wonderful coincidence that the earliest civilizations all arose in arid climates and built huge stone monuments, both of which are excellent at preserving ruins? How considerate of them to preserve the archaeological record. I am completely convinced that if you go back 5,000 years, you will find many civilizations as impressive as Egypt or Mesopotamia, but in humid climates that built with wood and therefore left no traces. Story 35. My personal computer telling me something is taking longer than expected is really William Henry Gates 3 throwing shade at me in real time. Story 36. The 2018 Hawaii missile alert was not a mistake. Someone, most likely North Korea, launched a projectile, and we intercepted it using technology that was not ready for public disclosure. Story 37. There was dishonesty in the last United States presidential election that affected the vote. I am not certain if it changed the election outcome, but I am confident that actions were taken to affect the true counts. Story 38. Hollywood is the most successful organized money laundering scheme in the history of organized crime. Story 39. That Dan Cooper survived the jump and used some of the money to create a website to taunt the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Story 40. There is a conspiracy in the women's fashion industry. They deny us pockets to sell more handbags. Story 41. I don't usually put much stock in paranormal activity, but I do fully believe Lake Lanier is haunted. Stay out of there, folks. Story 42. 30% of the comments on Reddit are by paid government employees of nations whose political goals are to disrupt Western powers through social unrest. Story 43. Our brains are more powerful than we think. I have, on multiple occasions, dreamed of my future, sometimes years before the events occur. I have known a few people who claim to have experienced the same thing. Story 44. We are not alone in the universe. It would be extremely self-centered, selfish, egotistical, and quite dangerous to think we are the only life out there. A quick search on how big the universe and galaxy are should tell you how much we do not know. It is incredible. Story 45. I know that Lil Elon's Doge boys planted lines of code to siphon off billions of United States taxpayer dollars to untraceable offshore bank accounts in the offices and departments they raided. Story 46. The United States government created a policy to bribe the volunteer military by offering them basic socialist welfare guarantees. They then deliberately made sure these guarantees were the absolute worst to convince the military that the United States government is too incompetent to ever provide social welfare. In fact, it would be harmful to the country to allow these individuals power over healthcare, housing, transportation, and food. Cannot prove it. I suggested it to my hardcore conservative retired Air Force intelligence father. He paused for a long minute and then said slowly, I actually would not be surprised. It is a conspiracy theory, but it would have required only a handful of people to set it up before inertia took over and made the poor conditions persist without others needing to learn about the conspiracy. It has a tangible goal in social engineering. It does not require a particularly unusual worldview to think of the plan. Soldiers have always received as little as their commanding officers could provide. It has a great deal of plausible deniability. It benefits people who are already rich and powerful. These are hallmarks of conspiracies later proven true. Story 47. Google is intentionally making their search engine worse to push users to use their artificial intelligence and collect everyone's data for training purposes. Story 48. The stock market is a way for the wealthiest 1% to control all the money in the United States and is completely controlled. Story 49. Mattress stores are fronts for money laundering. People do not buy new mattresses that often, and there are always 3 or 4 of them within less than a 2-block radius. Story 50. That Donald Trump is not actually in control of anything right now. The people behind the scenes plan to have him removed around February 2027 so that J.D. Vance can still run 2 more times. An incumbent with less than 24 months in office can run and serve an additional 2 terms. J.D. Vance will be able to play both sides, telling the Make America Great Again supporters that he is still their candidate, while telling non-MAGA supporters that he is not aligned with the MAGA movement and just has not had enough time yet to enact his own policies. He will have a huge advantage as both the incumbent and the new guy from the new generation. The Democratic Party will not be able to run a consistent message against him. If the country is doing even somewhat well by 2032, he will easily get reelected because incumbents face a very low bar to clear. The people behind the scenes between now and February 2027 want Donald Trump to create chaos to cover their quiet moves. They fully intend to have him removed with a golden parachute. Trump agreed to this because all he currently cares about is avoiding jail and securing as much money as possible. Story 51. Netanyahu knew there would be an attack on October 7th and allowed it to happen to distract from his domestic troubles and diminish the protests against his government. It turned out to be far worse than the early intelligence indicated. Story 52. I think déjà vu is actually a memory of our past life. I believe it is a subconscious message from us, for us, so we can take the opportunity to make a different choice or do something differently in this lifetime. I think we continue to relive our life until we get it right, in whatever capacity that may be. Story 53. Major League Baseball reinstated Pete Rose for Hall of Fame eligibility because they have evidence that Shohei Ohtani was betting on baseball. If proof becomes public, they would have to ban him for life. Now they can say that Rose was forgiven and that Ohtani could receive a lesser penalty. Story 54. The police have cameras at every intersection in my town and watch them on a large wall of monitors in the police station. I have toured the police station and have seen this. I also think they control the traffic lights to delay impatient drivers. If a person seems impatient at a light, such as inching forward, the green light will be delayed. If you are not visibly impatient, the lights cycle normally. I have been observing this for 20 years. Our lights sometimes seem to be controlled by a person who wants to punish any car that appears impatient. However, they do not hold me up because I am not an impatient driver. I find it somewhat amusing, so I am not raising the issue in town. Story 55. Bigfoot. My friend and I were in the mountains in Pennsylvania, past Punxsutawney. We were staying in a friend's hunting cabin and decided to go for a walk in the woods. We came across a huge footprint in the snow. It was in November. There was snow here and there, and the ground not covered with snow was hard. Scared us a lot. This happened in 1997, so there were no cell phones to take a picture as proof. Story 56. The universe is a massive group of overlapping fields of repelling and attractive forces culminating in the existence of a dimensional axis we consciously observe. At some stage, these fields will return to a stable state and collapse. The universe's final form will be a 2-dimensional plane immediately before it ceases to exist as all fields cancel each other out. It is very difficult to prove. Story 57. The military helped the police cover up the crime committed against me, allowing the perpetrator to essentially get away with it. Story 58. Most mattress stores are money laundering businesses. There are 13 mattress stores in my small city. I refuse to believe enough mattresses are being sold to keep all of them in business. Story 59. Ghosts and spirits exist. I have seen a door at work open with no physical input from anyone nearby, despite that door usually swinging in the opposite direction. I have had multiple objects fall off shelves for no clear reason. I have even had help from a spirit at work while moving pallets. My cat passed away when I was about 10 or 11, so I was old enough to know she did not run away. For months after she died, my bedroom door would slowly creak open, and I would feel something jump onto my bed, then onto my chest where she used to sleep. That stopped after I told her she did not need to look after me anymore and that I would be fine. I completely believed she was looking after me. Story 60. Walking backward instead of turning around and walking forward accounts for a large percentage of avoidable deaths. Story 61. Other life exists or has existed besides what is on Earth. The universe is too vast for us to be the only planet with life. Whether single-cell organisms or life with technology like us, it is arrogant to assume we are the only life out there. Story 62. Vladimir Putin and his wealthy associates have severely damaged the Russian economy and infrastructure, resulting in very few, if any, operational nuclear weapons or viable delivery methods. Story 63. When I was little and learned that small animals have very fast heart rates and large animals have much slower heart rates, I concluded that every animal must be born with a certain number of heartbeats in their life. When you reach that number, it's the end. I still can't shake that belief and sometimes wonder how many heartbeats I have left. Story 64. I think the Fermi paradox has a reasonably simple explanation. Imagine you are a primitive tribe living in an inaccessible valley. You and other local groups use smoke signals to communicate. You start wondering if there are other people outside the valley, but you never see smoke signals anywhere but inside the valley, so you assume it is empty out there. In the meantime, the entire planet is populated and communicating through radio waves, satellites, and fiber optics, having left smoke signals behind a long time ago. We assume that electromagnetic waves are the primary way to communicate over vast distances in space, but it is actually a real problem and would be abandoned as soon as there was a real-time alternative. Maybe quantum entanglement or some other communication method that doesn't take hundreds of years to travel between star systems. That way, we would be surrounded by communication and civilizations, but completely oblivious to the outside universe because we are still at the smoke signals phase. Story 65. I am completely certain that the child was hired to shoot at him, then killed to cover it up. Very few people would have known about it, and he was silenced himself, so we will never get the truth. Story 66. We as beings interact daily with multiple other realities that are so close to ours we do not notice unless they are very different, causing a Mandela moment. When we dream, we are peeking into other realities, and déjà vu occurs when another version of you is sleeping and viewing through your eyes. Story 67. There is a single man named Harold with an unlimited number of accounts whose entire life is devoted to being contrarian and argumentative with everyone on Reddit. Story 68. I read a story a few years ago about a woman whose dog suddenly developed a keen interest in one of her ears. The dog was constantly sniffing at that ear. A friend suggested she see a doctor, and it turned out she had a small tumor in her ear. Story 69. My phone is constantly recording audio from my conversations and using it to target ads. Story 70. The Sumerian god Enki is the snake in the Bible, and the worst thing he did, according to Gnostics and Sumerians, was to give humans a little knowledge and wisdom. This gift spawned civilization and human cooperation more than 14,000 years ago. People loved Enki. His son became one of the most celebrated gods ever, thousands of years before the Bible existed. Enki's brother Enlil became the god of the Torah and Bible. Enlil had his good points, like law, but was extremely jealous and vengeful. Since the most ancient recorded Sumerian gods were thought to live in the cities of ancient Iraq and in the heavens, the Bible is essentially Enlil's story with his brother Enki as a counterpart. Enlil was the dominant god in the region. Enki is similar to the later figures Prometheus or Hermes. Clever, wise, kind, generous, and independent. The Torah or Old Testament reflects the sibling rivalry of Enki and Enlil. Enlil was the dominant Sumerian god for thousands of years before the Bible existed. Enki was a lesser god associated with sweet water, necessary for fertile crops and civilization's survival. Enlil was famously jealous and easily annoyed. According to the Sumerians and Ubaid culture, he sent the flood recorded in the Epic of Gilgamesh, written at least 2,000 years before the story of Noah and his ark, that wiped out the earth, meaning the known regions of Mesopotamia and Africa, because humans were considered too noisy. Humans were gifted with intelligence and knowledge by Enki. He, along with an similar to the Egyptian god Ra, were part of the original seven gods known as the Council of Gods. This council is mentioned once or twice in the Bible as those God consulted before sending the flood in Sumerian, Semitic, Hebrew, Muslim, and Christian religions. The gods came to earth for workers. Humans existed but were considered unintelligent, which aligns with evolutionary theories that Neanderthals and others died out before civilization developed. Enki gifted humans intellect. He was the original Sumerian god of wisdom and knowledge. Humans loved this gift, but it made them willful and contrary to Enlil. When Enlil made a covenant with the tribes of Israel, after being the dominant god for thousands of years, he declared, "I am the Lord your God. You shall have no others before me." The conflict between Gnostics and Jews or Christians reflects the sibling rivalry between Enki and Enlil, specifically whether knowledge and wisdom manifesting as ideas like free will are threats to blind faith. Gnostics view the snake or Enki as a benefactor because knowledge is a gift. Personally, I prefer wisdom in my understanding of the divine. I also suspect that the bombing of the Middle East by Israel and the United States after the discovery of Gnostic texts in the 1940s reflects a fear of knowledge and reason that challenge established religious authority. The so-called evil they condemn may really be the expression of reason, knowledge, and wisdom, things independently obtainable and free. Enki and Enlil founded some of the first cities in ancient Iraq, the cradle of civilization, many thousands of years before the Bible was written. In Enki's surviving cuneiform texts, he explicitly says that our future is buried in our past. If one believes in intelligent design theory, it is worth wondering why the jealous god of the tribes of Israel, later Muslims and Christians, supposedly derived from these Sumerian gods, led to destruction in the Middle East, targeting the very cuneiform texts of Enki and Enlil. I believe in science and evolution but have great respect for early humans and their interpretations of spirituality. It is troubling that clues to civilization's origins are repeatedly destroyed. Religion has controlled the narrative for at least 14,000 years of recorded history, while spirituality is often hundreds of thousands of years older, often focused on divine mother goddesses and shamanism. The story of Enki and Enlil also explains the creation of patriarchy on Earth. Enki's son Marduk massacred the goddess Tiamat, created the world from her body, and mixed the blood of her consort with clay to create humans to serve the gods. Mixing blood with soil or clay is common in ancient origin stories. Later, Enki gifts humans knowledge in paradise, a word that originally meant a walled garden, located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in modern-day Iraq, just like the much later story of Genesis. I am confident, based on archaeological records from the earliest advanced civilization, which later included Semitic peoples, that the story of the Torah and Bible drew from these ancient myths. The god of wisdom and knowledge, Enki, was demonized thousands of years later, with the mythology cribbed from Sumerians and Egyptians. This reflects a potential unified theory of religious development, where dominant mother goddess belief systems were destroyed by evolving patriarchal societies, a very recent development in human evolution. Much of the bloodshed in the name of Enlil's Hebrew, Christian, and Muslim god was, in part, aimed at denying the value of wisdom and knowledge in human advancement. Enki seems like a remarkable god, predating Neith and Isis and certainly Athena. His demonization stems from intolerance and jealousy. Preventing diversity and the exchange of knowledge and wisdom is how religion has limited human progress. Ancient Greek philosophers believed that living according to reason and thought aligns with our true nature. Consider recent attacks on education. Authoritarian leaders like Hitler and Stalin did the same under the guise of Christian authority. Organized religion still opposes education, knowledge, wisdom, and free will. This is consistent across history, with countless wars and conquests aimed at forcing uniform belief and suppressing independent thought. America's founders, from the Enlightenment era, never wanted religion enforced or sustained by the government. Our progress came from education and industry, not religion. Claims that America is exclusively a Christian nation are false. Our laws protect religious freedom. In 2025, faith tempered with reason could foster more moral, quality individuals. Extremes on either end, willful ignorance or intolerance, reflect how the world is living now as it winds down, which seems a waste. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.